All right, Shalom, Yashala. Another video giving all praises to Yahweh by Hashem Yahushai, by Hashem Rakah Kadash, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, double honors to the apostle, elders, the great millstone, much salutation to the brothers teaching word for the hopeful elect, soon to be the elect, most high will, to the hopeful extended elect, Shalom, blessings. Men, women, and children, we continue to exalt those names, Yahweh. He is to be his son, Yahushai. He that delivers. And we always say in the name of the Holy Spirit. I'm gonna call this blacks versus or Nigerians or some to that effect. A black versus Nigerian conversation. And what Nigerians are saying, I've read the comments and even some of the videos. I think I've seen maybe a couple of videos I've seen where Nigerians are calling out blacks in America, saying that they're dirty and they're not, they don't, they ain't gang selling. The same thing as so-called white men be saying, which is true. It was true, and in a lot of ways it was undeniable. Like during 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and I think so-called black people, they know the truth. They're waking up. They've gotten better. I think the men have gotten better with knowing and being more aware, being more awake. But still, we're in slavery. Still, we're a byword among these nations. And that's one of the things I wanted to point out too in this video. Now, I looked up one of the things that, I've seen or the vibration I've gotten when a lot of Nigerians talk about the blacks in America. I think it comes from a state of mind of their country being independent, sovereignty, land, if I'm saying it right. And I think part of their pride comes from knowing that, maybe being taught that. Pretty sure it's taught in the schools, but and of course, I mean, it's a give and take on that. It seemed like, and I say so-called blacks because we're the same people. All this Nigerian versus black. I mean, they both mean black, man. Come on. It does. We were basically blacks, so-called blacks, were destroyed here in America, psychologically, physically. A lot of pain, suffering, ghettos, projects. That was designed by the so-called white man, by the way of slavery. But Nigeria and Niger is not a nationality. It's not. And it even tells you right here. I looked it up. I Googled it, and it said the name Nigeria comes from the Niger River, which flows through the country. British journalist Flora Shaw coined the name in 1897 as a shortened, convenient term for the British territories in the area. Now, she might have been like, well, there's a bunch of black people here. I'm going to name it Nigeria. I don't know. But this is the woman that they show as coining it Nigeria. It's not it's kind of gritty, but Flora Shaw gives the name. A scan article detailing how the name Nigeria was suggested by Flora Shaw in the Times of London, the 18th the 8th of January 1897. So, um, and it says she coined the name in 1897 as a shortened, convenient term for the British territories in the area. And going back, we were the British people too. Like Britain means covenant man, London. But Nigerians don't know that. A lot of Nigerians that is, our people outside of the truth don't know too much of anything, man. And that's just the truth. That's why the apostles go into history, secular history. They go into a lot of historical information. Apostles, elders, bishops on down. Like they go, it says Shaw added the Latin suffix "ia," uh, meaning area of, to Niger, which itself is likely an alteration of a local Tuareg name, possibly Egru and I don't know what the fuck, meaning Great River. The name Nigeria was first published in print in 1897 by Flores. So, but Nigeria means black. Niger means black. It means, so she didn't really come up with an actual name, but maybe the land, what have you. I mean, this whole America and the outer skirts of America, regional places, this whole world really is ran by the so-called white man. So you can claim independence all you want. If you're a black company or black country, so-called black country, black company, you know, sovereignty, whatever, uh, and you're still under the oppressor, you're not independent, man. That's just like Jake owning a house. Yeah, you can own your house and your car and all that. You could be like these black women. They so-called independent figure. You could be independent all you want, but when it's time for the government to step in and say something, you're gonna have to listen to the government, or your ass is going to jail if you don't follow their policy, their laws. You're going to jail. So if Nigeria claimed themselves as a sovereignty land, but they're colonized there, and everything is narrated by the so-called white man, they're pretty much that's irrelevant. So they can't use that against Negroes in America. So okay, we started ground zero, and then we say, well, yeah, what's the difference? Well, there really is no difference. Basically, the only difference is the so-called Negroes over here and they're over there. But as far as you know, as far as taking on the narrative of a so-called white man that blacks in America are lazy and no good and on drugs and that's pretty much self-hate because you're from that same seed. Now a lot of these people have sold out. It says, and I looked up also how did Britain, no, how did Nigeria gain independence? Nigeria gained independence on October 1st, 1960. So that wasn't too long ago. Through a gradual process of political reforms and nationalist movements that intensified after World War II. The struggle was led by figures like, I'm not even going to try to pronounce these names, man, who mobilized the population through political parties and the press to challenge British rule. Constitutional reforms like the Laeton Constitution of 1954 granted more regional autonomy, if I'm pronouncing that right, leading to self-governance in the eastern and western regions. Now, you drop down. Constitutional British authorities responded to growing demands for self-determination by implementing a series of constitutional changes that progressively gave Nigerians more power. Now, it didn't mean overall world power or their own power, but more power than they had. It's almost like Atlanta, being blacks from Atlanta. They always saying, well, yeah, this is black. Atlanta is a black state, basically, You know what I'm saying? And they got a lot of black businesses, a lot of black. There's a lot of money that flows through there, and a lot of support of black businesses, support of black people. You know, but there's a lot of sodomites there. So and so much that a lot of people don't even want, a lot of Jakes don't even want to go there. So you know, it's pros and cons, but it's more cons than pros because the so-called white man is still ruling. And what did it say? Rise of nationalism, educated Nigerians, the press led by newspaper like, and what deems them as education? Because true education, like the apostles always say, comes from within, and it comes with this truth in the knowledge and wisdom, understanding of the Most High. So if you're educated by the so-called white man, narrated by his educational, you know, uh, standards, then how educated are you? I mean, true overall, you know, basic fundamentals of what you should know about your own selves and your own people, the origin of how things begin, how these nations begin. I mean, even though it seems fundamental, a lot of that is really complex to people because they don't really know how that could be. Like, that's why these other camps they don't really go into heavy breakdowns because it's just like they've made it complex for themselves, and it's really simple. Uh, they don't understand that and heathens can't be saved, nations can't be saved, and it's really simple. Labor unions played a crucial role in mobilizing the population against colonial rule. Events like the like 1945 general strike. Now I mentioned this before. You got a black. You could call it black caucus. You could call it black boule. You could call it black elites. You got that everywhere. Even in a European ruled country, so-called European ruled country, you got a black elite. So black like BET, like even, example of here in America, BET, when we, and especially the '90s when it, everything was popping for Jake. Everything was like, magazines, clothing lines, BET, black shows, Bill Cosby, Fresh Prince, and all the shows that kind of followed and prospered on that stamp, that banner of black excellence, so to speak, so called. Then you'd be like, well, damn, black people was independent, but nah, we were never independent. We was still slaves, And then you find out all those prominent, so-called prominent people in high seat that are so-called black and even so-called Latinos, uh, they sold out. So, and even if it was a, you know, campaign through campaign process, campaign and all that, even if they didn't sleep with goat, sleep with a goat, or do some kind of heavy Illuminati ritual type of thing, they took a back seat, but and eventually sold their people in another kind of way. Not giving them so much, or sharing money within a small circle of your prospering country, your prospering businesses of your country, to where you're not going to make the whole country rich. You're not going to make whole Africa rich. And I understand that dynamic. That if they, proclaim, profess that Nigeria is better, or on a better pedestal, then well, you gotta be a representation of whole Africa. But see, they can't get along with everybody in Africa because everybody in Africa is not their people. So And also, along with that, Africa was named after Leo Cipro Africanus, as well as America, America Vespucci. So when you, like I said, going back to that word, Niger just means black. It's not a nationality, man. So when you say, yeah, I'm independent and we from Nigeria and we're Nigerians, well, you're just calling yourselves black, which Negroes over here call themselves black too. Black entertainment, black power movement and all that. And then when you have Nigerians that come over here in America, you know, they have to get support from the black people of the black body of black caucus, or they gonna be called sellouts. So what's the use of upholding the flag of being independent and self reliant and regional self government, and you still got to depend on your own, basically, um, you know, you got to depend on the ones you kind of down and talk about, you know, when they come over here. I'm talking about when they come over here. So Most High told us we'd be a byword among all nations, man, as Israelites. Let me get that scripture because I've talked too much. I was just trying to explain something. Hopefully, I drew a picture about, but Deuteronomy 28:37, and thou shalt become an astonishment, talking about Israel. If you read, going just to read the whole chapter, and then, it picks up the curses from 15 if we didn't follow his commandments and statutes, laws, commandments, the God of Israel, Yahweh, his son Yahweh shall be the mediator to him to reconnect us and reestablish us back to Yahweh, because we're married to him. Tells you that in the scriptures, Jeremiah 3:16, I think it is, 14, I think. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations where the Lord shall lead thee. So Niger being called black is a byword, man. Let me look up that scripture. That definition right quick. Being called Nigeria. If you say you're Nigerian, you're not saying that you're a nationality. You're not saying you're a nationality, man. That's just you're a dark skinned person. You're a black person. Shemaya I. Shemaya I. Shemaya Wa. Shemaya Wa. Yeah, that is Wa.
Strong's H8148. Sheni Na.
No, that's my bad. It's Na. Shemaya Na. No, why am I saying my? Shana Yana. Shanayana, which is short word taunt guide. Short word something pointed, like you being pointed out, you taunted, you know, like blackie, darky, wetback, spick, you know, all kind of other words, made for that, kind of like said a derogatory term for our identity. And then I was watching an interview with Tim. That's what kind of sparked it up too. That she was interviewed by the Breakfast Club, and she was talking about, well, Afro beats is comes from Nigeria, and she was kind of like basically taking pride in Nigeria, and of course that's where she's from and all that. But you know, um, you can't set yourself apart from your own people and say, you know, and like Afro beats don't got nothing to do with the rest of Israel. You got Afro Mexicans, you got Afro Black Mexicans, Afro Puerto Ricans, you got Afro, you know, everything, Afro Benjamites. And we got to cut to the point, cut to basically the chase, because if we go through these bywords as an identity, it's endless, man. You'll be confused. You'll be so confused. You'll fall on the top of your head out of the bed because you're thinking like, what really am I? Well, when you go to the 12 tribes, it's 12 tribes, and as the 12 tribes were Israel, it's simple. But then you be like, well, am I black? Am I Nigerian? Am I Am I Ukrainian? Because I'm a black person born in Ukraine. I'm a black person born in China, and am I Chinese? And knowing damn well you're not Chinese, knowing damn well you're not a Ukrainian, you're not a Russian, and a lot of these, even going back to what the Apostle said, a lot of these country, the names wasn't even there. Russia wasn't even called Russia back then. Same thing with Nigeria, wasn't called Nigerian back then. Before Nigeria was Nigeria. Same thing with America. This was a place where no man dwelt. It says that in the Bible in the Apocrypha. You're not going to see, and that's what how raw the scriptures are. A lot of these people be like, "Well, I don't see America in the Bible. It ain't going to be called America, dumbass. It's going to be called a land that was never dwelt in, that no man has dwelt in before. They're going to go to that land." Adam, he didn't have to have a name. The Most High was already dealing with Adam's spirit. So much he was born. All you need to know, he was born in the Most High set him in the east of the garden, and he was born. He was, from the ground, and Most High gave him commandments, gave him structure. So when you follow that, and you inside of that structure and that circle and that precinct, that land of those people, then when they become Adam, I mean, when they become when the Adamites or the Adam becomes Israel and Israel becomes a nation, then you're gonna be like, well, I definitely know that history. We are definitely Israelites because I grew up under my fathers. Whatever y'all call them, I don't care, but they my fathers. They my my elders, my priest. Like everybody that you have as a father or a close one, loved one, as your people gonna call them different. You might have a father and they might call him Bugs because he got stung by a bunch of bugs and they teased him and shit and they be like, yeah, you bugs. He didn't agree with it, but maybe he laughed it off and be like, man, y'all crazy. He became best friends with him, and sometimes they start call him Bugs. I mean, he be like, it ain't so bad, you know. That was a crappy ass example, but you know what I'm saying? Like we get bywords all the time in the neighborhood, man. Uh, Busta Rhymes, he bust rhymes. You're gonna be like, why they call you Busta Rhymes? Well, I got it from this and that, but I do bust rhymes. Then they gonna be like, well, we want to see it. But his children they don't call him Busta Rhymes. For one, they call him Daddy, and then they know him as the spirit of everything, and all his children that come after and his grandchildren, they are part of a legacy or a family, regardless of what they called him in the rap game and all that. Regardless of his friends in the rap game, he got a whole different life as family. That's how Israel is amongst these nations. Like, yeah, we might travel, we might go to these other lands, but we got our own language, our own family, and our own heritage. But Israel, a lot of Israelites don't know that, so they'll go along with these bywords and just be called nigger, just be called black, just be called African American. Shit. How many blacks have used really African American? They don't use African American. I don't really saying. I ain't never heard of blacks really saying that. African lives matter, or African American lives matter. They say black. There's no African American or African entertainment television. There's black. Why? Why is nothing labeled Africa right? And y'all claim y'all Africans. Same thing with Nigerians. They don't really claim them. They don't really say Africa unless it's dealing with some um, power source, relatable power source. We powerful even in our low state. Even our low state, we still say we Israelites. We don't have to follow it up with this big mega systematic feel of power. We just be like, hey, shit, I'm under the curses. I'm an Israelite. I don't know. Shit, we fucked out here. We cursed. You know. So there's a black tie, black tie. Um, yeah, let me before I talk too much. So we were a byword, a taunt. Like I showed you in the other video, Niger called Niger. Paul said he was a Benjamite, which had nothing to do with being a heathen or Edomite. Same thing with the rest of the apostles, disciples. Um, let me see. I am black. Jeremiah 8 and 21, for the hurt of the daughter of my people, I am hurt. I am black. Astonishment has taken a hold on me. Yeah, because when people look, what do they say? What do they say about Israel? You shall be an astonishment. What is astonishment? A byword is astonishment. A nigga is an astonishment. They looking at like, oh shit. That's why most popular platforms was a mockery to Jake, such as a World Star Hip Hop, TikTok, you know, even YouTube, you know. Um, Let me look up that word astonishment right quick. So they were talking about, no, it's talking about because of the sadness or the bitterness, whatever. Now, yeah, you sad and bitter because you people calling you nigga and spick and spook and all that and African American. Yeah, you bitter, you sad. It's you know, it's a mourning state definitely because of who you are and the play of them with racism, the color of your skin, desolation, waste, yeah, horror. Yeah, the ghettos are wasted. The ghetto, you go to the ghettos, it look horrifying, man. You see a Negro with braids and gold teeth rolling down the street, sagging or driving a 6'4" with a damn gun hanging out there. It's terrifying. It's horrific. And look, they got at the end a wonderful thing. But there's beauty in that too. Look, ruin. The ghettos are a ruin. So that goes along. Those are player words too. That fits right in the puzzle pieces of being a Negro.
Strong's H 8047. Shema. Shema.
Shema, which means waste. Wonderful, desolate. Um, so really, when you compare those two, and having misunderstanding and no knowledge of our history, uh, basically you're going to be confused at the end of the day, and and it's going to be too late because the so-called white man, while you're arguing about that or having to be a controversy, the so-called white man is plotting and still mocking you on both ends as a Nigerian and as a black person, and they mean the damn same thing, man. So you could be called Nigerian, you can be called black, but your true nationality is Israel, because Israel means the Prince of Power. It has substance. It has uh, depth, and it has great meaning. Tell me the meaning of Nigeria or black, and tell me if it goes back to Prince of Power. Tell me how it goes back to being kings and priests. Because when every time somebody mentions black, it always comes with depression or some form of identity that got to be pushed to where they feel boxed in, to where they have to make such a great statement to be identified as somebody special when the world sees otherwise and them themselves struggle inside themselves otherwise too. Anyway, till next video, hopefully it's edifying. Shalom.